Welcome to Worship Culture with your host, Sewa, a podcast where we unravel God's intent for worship beyond a Sunday service. Lean in as we discover our identity as worshipers and shakers of culture. Hey, worshipers, welcome back to episode 7 of Worship Culture Podcast. It's your girl, Showa, and I'm really excited to be back. I know it's been a minute, but we're here. We're back at it again, like we never left. It's good to be back with you guys. I hope your quarantine is treating you okay. I'm definitely getting a rhythm of things now. I'm learning to manage my time better, learning to be super productive as well. Just, it's all a process. I'm extremely excited for this episode. Why, you may ask? Because one, my music band, Campus Fresh Music, dropped our album, The Flood. It's out now, and I'm super duper excited. It's been basically a year and some change. We've been working on this for a really long time, and it's so amazing to finally share this sound with everyone. I hope you guys go out there and download it and share it with your friends. It will bless you. I was listening to it last night and it actually blessed me. I keep listening to it over and over again, and I'm really honored to be a part of this project. So go check that out. You know what it is. You know what time it is. You know what we're doing next. It is Press Play. And on this episode of Press Play, it's going to be the Flood edition. So I'm going to be talking about 3 songs from the Flood that I love at the moment. These are my babies. These are songs that, we worked on for over a year now. So I can't pick a favorite, but it changes every day. Like sometimes it's one song, another time it's another song. So for today, these are my favorite songs right now in this season. It might change by the time you hear this, but yeah, the best part of this episode is that I can actually play a little snippet of each song for you to hear. I can't do that in other episodes because I don't have any sort of ownership for these songs. But for this one, it's my album. It's Campus Rush Music, so I kind of have that access to it. And I'm not gonna do that with any other song because we're not finna go to jail. So yeah, enjoy these songs. Press play. All right, I'm gonna be sharing these 3 songs in no particular order. The first one is Embers. Guys, this song is it. Trust me, I'm not being biased here, but Embers is such an amazing, intimate song. The concept of the song is speaking about, embers are little coals of fire that, they have fire in them. They have some sort of flame, but it hasn't consumed the coal completely. And I think that's kind of the journey of Christianity. Sometimes when, we have some sort of relationship with God, we had fire, we were on fire, completely consumed at a point in our lives, and something happens, and life happens, and our flame starts to fizzle out. And Embers is just saying to God, reignite that fire so that the embers of my heart can now be consumed. Such amazing songwriting. Shout out to Pastor Kofi on that, and Reggie. They wrote this song together, and it's such a deep message. Let the embers of my heart now be consumed. Fun fact, this song wasn't supposed to be on the Flood. And I was like, Pastor Gove, no, we have to put this on. So I'm really excited that it made it to the album because it's one of my favorites in the season. The second song is Victory Sound, and this song is a vibe, a whole vibe. Trust me, guys. It starts off as like a funk type track, and then it goes into like this South African sound, and then you think it's done, and it switches up on you into like a whole Congolese vibe. Guys, it is the song. It gives me so much energy. It's something that, I could see a lot of people dancing to. I could see this all over the world. It definitely captures a lot of different genres. The instruments on the song is amazing. The production on the song specifically is so, so intricate. And yeah, Victory Sound, go check that out if you want to dance. For real, for real. The last song is Breathe on Me. Oof. If you want to go to heaven and sit right next to Jesus, listen to Breathe on Me. This song is so, so, so intimate. I think it's one of those songs that could keep going on forever. Like you could keep singing this song forever, honestly. It has no end. Like you could actually just sing this song and never stop. Breathe on Me is very, very personal as well. And it's one of those songs that you could add your own lyrics. So it's breathe on me, have your way. Very simple lyrics. You could say anything, rain on me, pour in me, whatever it is that you're feeling in that moment, especially for worship leaders all over the world. This is definitely a song that you could lead or introduce to your church. So this song is really, really personal, and it's also a really, really good corporate worship song. Breathe on Me is my prayer time song. So check it out as well. I hope you guys check out those songs. Speaking of songs, this quarantine season has really, really blessed me with the amount of worship albums that's been released. I shared with you guys a couple episodes back. Stephanie Gretzinger's album was amazing. In this season, we heard from Bethel Music dropped Peace, their album as well. Maverick City Music with Volume 3, and then Amanda Cook dropped her single Help Is On the Way, which was amazing as well. Housefires has also been dropping, singles here and there. If you're into rap music, there's a project called Exit by Wande, and it is such an amazing body of work. So check that out as well. We also have Jonathan McReynolds' People, which is also such a good, good, good album. So we've been blessed with albums. And of course, The Flood, Campus Rush Music, which I already talked about. Yeah, it's been a season of like overdose of worship music. And Elevation Worship also dropped Graves into Garden. And initially, I was going to call this episode What Would You Do If He Walked Into the Room? And that's a song from the album. And this song really, really wrecked me. If you haven't heard it yet, please go on YouTube, watch the video. I think watching the video changed my life, truthfully. Just seeing Isaiah. Isaiah, by the way, is an amazing vocalist, and he is the person singing on this specific song. He took us into heaven. And this song was initially a spontaneous song that Pastor Stephen Furtick was writing on the fly. He wasn't trying to write a song from what I know. And this song to me has become such an anthem for me, from my personal walk with God, because it shifted my perspective on worship. It shifted, how I view worship. A lot of people forget that, each time we're in His presence, asking for His presence and worshiping Him, there is a high possibility that He will come and dwell because He inhabits our praises. So when we praise Him, chances are he's coming to dwell amongst us. He's coming to rest on our praises. And so sometimes we worship without that perspective. So it was really cool to see that perspective. In the same vein, the song Embers has a line where it says, "Everyone changes when you're in the room." And so these two songs together got me thinking about, what our posture should be when God is in the room. A scripture that dropped in my heart, as I was, I guess, preparing to be on this podcast today was Luke chapter 10, verse 38. I believe it's verse 38. Yeah, it's verse 38, just pulling it up right now, 38 to 42. I guess we can read it. And the fun fact about this, my Bible right now has a subtitle for it. It says Mary and Martha worship and serve. So significant. I'm going to read it. Now it happened as they went that he entered a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary, who also sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. But Martha was distracted with much serving, and she approached him and said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Therefore, tell her to help me." And Jesus answered and said to her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about many things." 42. But one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen that good part, which will not be taken away from her. This scripture is literally two different ways that we can respond to God when He's in the room. And one isn't necessarily better or worse than the other. It's just a matter of recognizing when one is needed and the other isn't. So, for example, Mary and Martha, sisters, Jesus is in the room. And we're all going to tie this back into worship and hosting the presence of God and knowing what to do in certain atmospheres. Jesus is in the room, and of course, there's um, need for him to be served. Someone has to give him food at some point, someone has to make him feel comfortable. But then there's also room for him to be worshiped. So there's two different dimensions of serving. So it's a matter of recognizing that there is service to him and there's service for him. And, as I said earlier, these two things are great, but we always have to identify which one is necessary at the time. So Martha's service was for him. He needed to eat. Jesus was probably hungry, but Mary's service was to him. And I don't know if you guys serve in church or, in whatever capacity in church. It's very, very easy to get super busy in the presence of God. You have to coordinate this and do that and walk around and make sure this is going on properly, depending on your role. And those key roles are so important, but also you need to be able to identify when it's time to, take off the Martha hat and put on the Mary hat. Because Mary's role was so significant to Jesus in that moment. And Martha was so annoyed. Like, Jesus, she needs to help me to serve you. And Jesus is saying, no, she is at the right place. And God has, spoken to me a lot in the past when I sometimes get distracted with service for God, that I forget that my number one role is service to God. Our number one priority is worship. So, we're going to talk more about the Mary approach in worship, knowing how to posture ourselves when we recognize that Jesus is in the room, and sometimes when we don't know that he's in the room. I think the best option is to assume that he is at all times and act accordingly. I have four little tips, very, very quick tips for you. It's not going to be a long episode today. I just felt like I had to touch base with you guys and share what I'm learning in the season. I know we're all in quarantine and we're not in a physical building, but these are tips that help you whether you're in church or whether you're out of church, whatever it is, any environment where you are worshiping God, this applies 100%. The first thing is focus. I wish I had a little acronym for you guys like FTSA or something. I don't know, but we'll see. The first thing is focus. What Mary had in that moment was tunnel vision. You could have God in the room. Like the song says, what would you do if he walks into the room? You can have God in the room and not even know it. Martha was aware of the presence of God, but she was so distracted with everything else happening around her that she didn't even find time to be at his feet. And Jesus needed her to be at his feet at that time. So, in an atmosphere of worship, in a place where God is willing to walk into the room, you need to be focused, tunnel vision, like laser focus on Jesus, no distractions. You know, sometimes back in the day, I would be in worship in service and super distracted by people around me or um things that's going on at home, or I'm super hungry, so I'm thinking about like chicken or whatever the case is. But you have to understand that focus is the number one thing. Your heart needs to be locked into the moment. And a practical thing you can do is close your eyes. I do that all the time. And sometimes, as a worship leader, it's not always advised to do that because you also need to watch and see what's going on around you. But if you can, find moments to zone in so that you are completely locked into his presence. The second thing is engage. This one is very interesting. I don't know if you guys remember that video that was circulating at point. It was Brother Franklin. Brother Franklin. I think it's been like almost 10 years, if not more than 10 years at this point. He was a young man in a church service. It's on YouTube. Just type it in somewhere. And he was doing backflips, guys. Like backflips. Like he would go up, I think it was like offering time, and he would dance in front of the church and, be super expressive. And a lot of us, including myself, was like laughing, like, Uncle, what is this? But I'm reminded of David. He was so engaged in worship that he would dance his clothes off. And that's the posture we need to have whenever God is in the room with us. We need to show him that we are engaged in worship. Watching that video, the elevation song, What Would You Do? I saw everyone's posture change immediately that song started. So it's what would you do if he walked into the room? And you see people on their face, you see people crying, you see people singing out. And those are the things that we need to constantly do when we're in the presence of God and when he's there with us in worship. Find practical things to do to be engaged. Raise your hands, jump if you have to. I am an introvert, like complete introvert. I think I'm transitioning kind of out of it a little bit. Sometimes I'm extroverted, sometimes I'm introverted, but in worship I am the most expressive. I'm yelling, I'm jumping, I'm twirling, anything that can get me moving, because I truly understand the David type of praise, the David type of worship is expressive. And I say that because, we hear about the woman with the alabaster box a lot. And something that we know about her is that, she got her oil, her jar of oil, and poured it on Jesus as a form of worship. But God showed me a couple years ago, actually, maybe last year, actually, and said to me, I'm not looking for people to bring physical boxes anymore. You are the carrier of oil, you are the box. And so when you come into God's presence and when he's in the room with you, you are supposed to break before him, and the content, everything that's inside of you is supposed to spill out. And so that just shows you that our worship isn't designed to be reserved. It's not pretty worship. It's not, don't mess up my makeup type worship. We're not, conserving our outfits or making sure that we're not stained. If you have to go on your face, it doesn't matter if you're wearing white. You're just going to have to do laundry after service, but that's the type of worship that God is deserving of. So, spill worship is what I call it. And that's the David type of worship. The third tip is use your words. I know a lot of parents say this to their babies, to their children. Sometimes it's hard to understand what the child is trying to get across. And so the parent encourages the child to use their words. And that's the exact same concept with worship and with God. When He's in the room with you in that moment, He wants you to speak to Him from your heart. There are moments in service when the worship leader might lead you to sing your own song. And this is the perfect moment where you get to say to God what you feel about Him that's not necessarily in the lyrics that you just sang. So speak to Him, say to Him how much you love Him, speak about His goodness, speak about His kindness. This is when you fully, fully speak to Him from your heart. Think about it. If you knew Jesus right now was in front of you, what would you say to Him? In worship, there's always an opportunity for you to speak back to Him. Fun fact, I wrote a song a couple years ago, and a lot of people thought I sat down somewhere and, wrote down lyrics, but this was unscripted. I was just saying to God how I felt about Him in the moment. And that usually is the best moment of worship. And so, whenever God is in the room, which is, again, as I said earlier, the best assumption you could make as a worshiper, you need to be able to express to Him how you feel about Him. And the very last point is listen. This one's so important, guys, because a lot of us worship and spend time in His presence. And when He walks into the room, we're not even still enough to listen to Him. And this might be the most important part of worship. You need to be a great listener when He walks into the room. And I say this because God always has an agenda, He always has a purpose for each time He visits His children. He has something He wants to tell you, He has some sort of direction, He has some sort of instruction, He has things to talk to you about, whether it's to you, whether it's for someone else, whether it's for your personal life, or sometimes He just wants to spend more time with you. I was on Twitter just a couple of hours ago and I saw a tweet about Pastor Michael Todd's service. Apparently, his service was supposed to be, about relationships. I think he's talking about like relationships right now. And all of a sudden, the entire service was a worship service. And that to me shows great listening skills because God walked into that service and said to him, I want to spend more time in worship with you guys. I want to be with you guys. I want you guys to worship me for a long time. I don't want to hear anything else. I don't want to hear no sermons. I want you. I want your attention. I want your worship. And so God sometimes speaks to the worship leader. So any worship leader listening to this right now, you need to be hyper sensitive to God's voice in worship, because each time He's in the room, He wants you to do specific things at specific times. He might need you to, speak over people, speak healing over people. He might need you to be still. He might need you to worship longer than expected, so be a great listener. Most of your problems, most of your issues might be resolved if you just listened more in the presence of God. So whenever God is in the room, yes, it's good to speak to Him. Yes, it's good to express and engage and focus, but it's also, if not the most important, very, very important to listen attentively and obey accordingly. Let's jump right into the listeners' questions. So, this question says, how do you engage the audience when worshiping? I'm guessing this is from the perspective of a worship leader. Engaging the audience could be done in so many ways. I've said this before in a previous episode. The best way to teach people how to worship is by being an example of a worshiper. So, as a worship leader, if you want your church to be super engaged, you need to be super engaged. So, um, if you want a church that is constantly dancing, you need to be the most energetic dancer there is in church. Lift your hands. For every worship leader, there's a worship follower. And so the entire church is following you as you lead them into the presence of God. And so whatever you're doing, your church starts doing as well. And so definitely in your actions, you need to be super expressive and they will also join you. Secondly, you need to talk. Sometimes you need to talk through your worship. I think I did a little bit too much of that in the beginning stages of my worship leading. I would talk through my entire worship set. Guys, can we raise our hands? Guys, I was in the shower today and I was hearing God say this. In those moments, I felt it was necessary because it got people to understand why they're worshiping. So there's definitely room for that with wisdom. Share as much as is needed for that atmosphere. So, for example, if you notice that the church isn't really engaged, you could say something like, "Can we raise our hands? Can we sing that part one more time?" Um, or sometimes express to them the meaning of the song. Depending on how much time you have, of course, if you have a 10-minute set, I wouldn't spend more than 1 minute explaining the importance of worship or explaining or telling people what to do in worship, how to respond in worship. So definitely, you need to somehow express to them, can you sing that part one more time? Oh, just the voices. That's always a good little tip that I do sometimes, getting everyone else to sing and no one else except the audience also gets them feeling like, yes, I'm a part of this worship experience. So, those are tips that I have personally that's helped me and helped my church to be more engaged in worship. I hope that answered your question. Please send all your questions to worship CLTR on Instagram. Follow us, share. I've seen a couple of reviews, and I'm really, really excited that you guys are reviewing it and rating it. Please share it on social media. Follow us. Slide in our DMs. We want to hear from you. I love you guys so much, and I'm really, really happy that we're back and running and back in this podcast game. I love you guys so much. It's Sewa, and I'm signing out.